So I'm going to read a little bit more from Myths and Legends. I left off here on Oedipus, on the right side. So, I'll start here. The family of Oedipus. As a royal dynasty, Oedipus's family were closely involved with the politics of their city, Thebes. When Oedipus blinded himself and left the city, Jocasta's brother Creon took over the throne until Oedipus's sons Eteocles and Polynices were old enough to rule. But the brothers fought and killed each other, and Creon returned to the throne. He tried to rule for the good of the city, but was known for his ruthlessness. He did not even spare Antigone, who was betrothed to his son, Haemon, and confined her in a cave to die for supporting her brother Polynices against his wishes. Jocasta. Queen Jocasta hung herself in anguish on realizing that she had mistakenly married her own son, Oedipus. Antigone. Oedipus's daughter Antigone supported her father and stood up for her brother Polynices after his rebellion. Creon. Trying to deal firmly with the rows and tragedies in his family, Creon acted violently and became the archetype of the cruel ruler. The riddle of the Sphinx. The puzzle posed by the Sphinx to the people of Thebes is now a familiar riddle, but it baffled everyone when they first heard it. In its most famous form, the riddle is what goes on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the daytime, and 3 legs at night. Oedipus rightly guessed that the answer was a man who crawls on 4 limbs as a baby, walks upright on 2 legs as an adult, and uses a stick or 3rd leg in old age. The Sphinx. Sphinxes take various forms in the ancient world, but the Great Sphinx had the head of a woman, the body and legs of a lion, and the wings of a bird. Thebes. Although it is a family tragedy, the story of Oedipus and his sons is intimately bound with the history of their city, Thebes. In Boeotia, whose ruling family traced its ancestry back to a magical event in the life of the hero Cadmus, the founder of Thebes. Much later, when Polynices was ousted by his brother Eteocles, he fled to Argos seeking help from its king, Adrastus. Together they started a war with 5 other rebels, collectively known as the 7 against Thebes. Their army was slaughtered, both brothers were killed, and the noble line begun by Cadmus came to an end. Cadmus slaying the dragon. Cadmus killed a dragon that lived on the plains of Thebes and planted its teeth on the ground. From the monster's teeth grew an army of men who became the ancestors of the Thebans. Oedipus at Colonus. The oracle had told Oedipus that he would die in a place sacred to the Furies. Colonus was such a place. It was also special because it was the location of one of the entrances to the underworld. After Oedipus came to Colonus, there was a thunderstorm, which he thought was a sign from Zeus that his life was coming to an end. It was from here that, ignoring the demands of the Thebans, Oedipus passed below the earth to the next world. The Greek playwright Sophocles was born in the area and described these events in his play Oedipus at Colonus. Oedipus as a blind beggar. In his blind wanderings, Oedipus was guided by his daughter Antigone, the only member of his family who remained faithful to him. Freud and Oedipus. The pioneering psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, 1856 through 1939, has been linked with the Oedipus myth ever since he coined the term Oedipus complex to describe the sexual obsession of a child, usually male, with the parent of the opposite sex. The phrase is somewhat misleading, as Oedipus did not know Jocasta was his real mother. It has been widely used in both psychology and literary studies. The Trojan War. Homer's great epic poem, the Iliad, describes a war between the Greeks and the Trojans that lasted for 10 years. The conflict began after Paris, a prince from Troy, eloped with Helen, the wife of the Greek king Menelaus, and the Greeks mounted an expedition to get her back. On Mount Olympus, the gods and goddesses looked down on the battlefield, taking sides and influencing events as heroes of both sides fell. Finally, the Greeks were victorious and took Helen back home. The Trojan Horse. The Trojans were known as skilled tamers of horses, so the booby-trapped wooden horse was an iconic gift from the Greeks, which had a disastrous result. Soldiers in combat. In this engraving, created in the style of Greek face painting, Trojans attack the Greek ships with fire, while the Greeks defend themselves with their spears. The myth. The two sides were well matched. Each had the services of good leaders, like the Trojan prince Hector and the Greek general Agamemnon. Each had other famous soldiers and fighters on their side. Paris for the Trojans, and men such as Achilles and the cunning Odysseus for the Greeks. Each side also had the backing of several gods and goddesses. Aphrodite and Poseidon were on the side of Troy. Apollo, Athena, and Hera favored the Greeks. Therefore the stalemate continued, with many minor battles, but no overall victory for years. Achilles and Patroclus. The war reached a climax when the two of the Greek leaders quarreled. Agamemnon, who had been forced to give up one of his concubines, took as his mistress one of the many women of Achilles. In disgust, Achilles withdrew his forces from the fighting, and the Trojans began to get the upper hand. To win back the initiative, Patroclus, a close friend of Achilles, asked his comrade for permission to lead his troops and disguise himself in the armor of Achilles. When the Trojan soldiers saw the best of the Greek troops back on the battlefield, apparently led by Achilles himself, they began to lose heart. This gave the Greeks more success, but just as they seemed to be winning, Hector killed Patroclus. The Greeks gained ground. The death of Patroclus roused Achilles, who returned to the fight, killing Hector and dragging his body around Troy's walls. Next, the gods encouraged the Greeks to bring the great archer Philoctetes into the battle, and the bowmen killed Paris, a huge psychological blow for the Trojans. The Greeks then stole Athena's statue, which was a sign of good fortune for the Trojans, from her shrine in Troy. Finally, the gods put into the mind of Odysseus the trick of the hollow wooden horse, in which soldiers could hide. The Greeks left the horse in front of the city and feigned a withdrawal. The Trojans dragged the statue into the city. During the night, the Greek soldiers emerged from its belly and opened the city gates. The rest of the Greek army poured in, and Troy was destroyed. The Judgment of Paris. The event that started the war occurred on Mount Ida, where the Trojan prince Paris was visited by three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Eris, goddess of discord, had given them a golden apple, inscribed for the fairest. Each of the three claimed the apple. Zeus commanded Hermes to take them to Paris, who would decide which was the most beautiful. The goddesses tried to influence his decision by offering bribes. Athena pledged to grant him success in war. Hera promised power, and Aphrodite offered the hand of the world's most beautiful woman, Helen. Paris chose Aphrodite's offer, but Helen was already married to Menelaus of Sparta. When she eloped with Paris, hostilities between Greece and Troy began. The three goddesses, after Paris judged Aphrodite to be the fairest of the three goddesses, he earned the wrath of both Athena and Hera. Helen of Troy. Several reasons have been given for Helen's desertion of her husband, such as wickedness, forced abduction, and the influence of Aphrodite. The heroes. The story of the Trojan War is full of heroes who are the epic's main characters. They are generally brave in battle, but Homer's depiction of their characters is particularly interesting. Many are motivated by honor. The dispute between Achilles and Agamemnon over their concubines, for example, ignites because when Agamemnon appropriates the woman of Achilles, the latter's honor is affected. Homer shows that intelligence is essential in battle too. The hero Odysseus is renowned for his cunning. Achilles binding Patroclus' wound. Friendship was an important motivation in war. When Patroclus died, Achilles returned to the battle with renewed energy. Agamemnon returning with Cassandra. At the end of the war, Troy was captured and sacked. Agamemnon carried off Cassandra, the daughter of King Priam of Troy, as a prize. Menelaus pursuing Helen. Seen here pursuing his wife Helen, Menelaus portrayed in the Iliad as a noble king who fights bravely for his cause. Hector fighting Achilles. Achilles and Hector's fight was the key moment in the war. With Hector's death, the Trojans were weakened by the loss of one of their greatest fighters. Ajax committing suicide. A great warrior, Ajax survived the war, but went mad after a dispute with Odysseus and killed himself. Athene and Hera thundered, doing honor to the king of Mycenae, rich in gold. Homer, Iliad, Book 6. Or is that 6? No, that's 11, I think. The ancient city of Mycenae. Mycenae? I'm not sure how you say that. Although the story of the Iliad is a myth, all its characters come from real places in ancient Greece. Mycenae in the northeastern Peloponnese was said to be the home of Agamemnon. The city gate was a strong military power during the late Bronze Age. This ancient site was excavated in the 19th century by the German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann. He discovered stunning jewelry and other artifacts among the ruins, dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE. He claimed these objects belonged to Agamemnon, though there has never been any evidence to support this. Gold mask. Schliemann called this vase of beaten gold, unearthed from Mycenae, the mask of Agamemnon, but it could have belonged to any early Mycenaean king. The Odyssey. Homer's second epic, the Odyssey, tells the story of the Greek hero Odysseus, Ulysses to the Romans, on his journey home to Ithaca after the Trojan War. He faces many perils, including monstrous creatures and seductive women. Each encounter stretches his intelligence and cunning, but the greatest challenge comes when he arrives home to find his wife besieged by suitors who believe him to be dead. Greek ship. Greek ships had banks of oars, but were also equipped with sails, so Odysseus' ships would have been able to take advantage of the wind. Odysseus. Like all Greek heroes, Odysseus was physically strong, but he was also cunning, which helped him overcome the obstacles that beset his voyage. The myth. After leaving Troy, Odysseus and his sailors first came to the country of the Lotus Eaters. These inhabitants, who lived a lazy life of ease, tempted them with the lotus fruit, which had the power to make them forget the past. Odysseus had to force his reluctant companions back to their ships. Next they encountered the Cyclops, a race of one-eyed giants. Odysseus and his followers were caught by one of the Cyclops, Polyphemus, who kept them captive in a cave and ate some of them. When the Greek hero was asked to identify himself, he cleverly said he was called Autus. No one is killing me. Well, we know. I skipped. Okay, called Autus, meaning no one. Odysseus plied Polyphemus with wine, and then blinded the giant with a heated stake. When Polyphemus shouted, "Autus, no one is killing me," the other Cyclops heard him, but did not come to his rescue, because they thought he was drunk, and the Greeks managed to escape. Polyphemus complained to his father, the sea god Poseidon, who sent terrible storms to hinder Odysseus' journey. At the mercy of the winds. At their next port of call, Aeolus, the god of the winds, gave Odysseus the winds tied up in a bag, allowing him to control his course homeward. But Odysseus' men, filled with curiosity about the contents of the bag, untied it, letting loose all the winds. The ship was blown far off course, first to the land of the giant Laestrygonians, who destroyed most of their ships, and then to an island inhabited by the enchantress Circe, who turned Odysseus' men into pigs. But Odysseus saved himself by eating a protective herb given to him by the god Hermes. Circe saw that Odysseus was resistant to her magic and turned his crew back into men again. Circe advised Odysseus to visit the underworld to find out more about his future. He traveled there and had a vision in which his homeland was occupied by hostile invaders. The hero decided to hurry home, but his journey took longer than he had expected. Odysseus first encountered the sirens, enchanting creatures whose beautiful song lured all passing sailors. He sailed past them by commanding all his men to block their ears. After this, Odysseus' ship had to pass between Scylla, a six-headed man-devouring monster, and Charybdis, a whirlpool. Odysseus was forced to take the painful decision of losing 6 of his sailors to Scylla, each of whose 6 heads could only eat one man at a time, rather than have all of them drown in the pool of Charybdis. Monsters and obstacles. Odysseus encountered several obstacles on his journey. The giant Laestrygonians destroyed all the ships in his armada except for his own. When they were trapped in Polyphemus' cave, He and his men tied themselves to the underbellies of the Cyclops' sheep. The next day, Polyphemus led his sheep out to graze, and the Greeks escaped. On Circe's island, Odysseus' men were turned into pigs, thus delaying the voyage. The Laestrygonians. Antiphates, the king of the Laestrygonians, killed and ate one of Odysseus' men. Then all the giants pelted the Greek ships with huge rocks, sinking all but one. The magic of Circe. The enchantress Circe turned men into animals by giving them a potion and then striking them with her wand. Odysseus and Polyphemus. Using a sharpened stake of olive wood, Odysseus put out the single eye of Polyphemus so that he and his men could escape from the Cyclops' cave. Perils of the sea. The Greeks were a people who lived mainly on islands and in coastal settlements, and hence were accomplished sailors. They knew well that sea voyages, even in the often calm Mediterranean, had their dangers, and that the sailors had to watch out for unfavorable winds, dangerous whirlpools or currents, and jagged rocks. Odysseus had to cope with the tempests sent by Poseidon, and perilous currents, and some more fantastic dangers. Some of these, like the seductive song of the sirens, could be deceptive. Odysseus was warned by Circe that the song of the sirens must be resisted. Never yet has any man rowed past this isle in his black ship, until he has heard the sweet voice from our lips. Homer, Odyssey, Book 9. The Odyssey and the Sirens. While his sailors blocked their ears, Odysseus had himself tied to the mast so that he could not follow the sirens. Charybdis. This notorious whirlpool sank all passing ships, but Odysseus steered through the narrow gap between it and Scylla. The world of the dead. Odysseus visited the underworld to find out about his future. First he consulted the prophet Tiresias, who warned him not to harm the cattle of Helios. Then he met his mother Anticlea, who told him how his wife and son were suffering at home. Odysseus also met the ghost of Achilles. Finally he grew fearful and left the underworld in terror. Achilles. The ghost of Achilles told Odysseus he would rather live on earth as a humble laborer than rule among the dead. So I'm going to put my marker here and continue reading in another video. So yeah, hope I helped you fall asleep a little bit. Some myths and legends. Yeah, hope I helped you fall asleep a little bit, and thank you for watching my videos and subscribing and liking and commenting and everything.